Hi, boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Superheroes of STEAM with Miss Kathy from Shaler, North Hills Library. Today we are going to feature an exciting woman. Even though it's not Women's History Month, I just thought this was a really interesting book, and I love lighthouses. This is called Kate's Light, Kate Walker at Robbins Reef Lighthouse by Elizabeth Spires, illustrated by Emily Arnold McCulley, who is a Caldecott medalist for her book Moret on the High Wire. So we open with a picture of the port of New York around 1892. And let's see what else we can learn about Kate Walker. In 1882, Kate sailed across the ocean from Germany to America with her small son Jacob. She was 34 years old, a widow, and hoped to find a better life for them. Even though she knew only a few words of English, she quickly found a job as a cook at the officers' quarters at Fort Hancock, New Jersey. John Walker, the keeper, trying to get the glare off the page for you here. The keeper of the Sandy Hook Lighthouse took his meals at the officers' quarters. Impressed with Kate's energy and determination, he began giving her English lessons. Soon they were married. For a year, John, Kate, and Jacob lived on shore in a large house next to the Sandy Hook Lighthouse, where Kate kept a garden and a few chickens. Then, John accepted a position as keeper at Robbins Reef, an offshore lighthouse in New York Bay between Manhattan and Staten Island. Kate was unhappy about the move. She knew she would miss her friends in town, her garden, and the chickens. And where would Jacob run and play? Had she really come all the way from Germany to live in a lonely lighthouse? From far off, Robbins Reef Lighthouse looked like a tiny candle on a birthday cake. Here they are sailing up to it. Up close, you know what? Hold on 1 second. I'm going to shut the curtains here and see if that helps the glare. Okay, let's see if that's any better. Up close, the 5-story cast iron tower loomed over their rowboat. The lighthouse stood on a granite foundation surrounded by water. Kate noticed there wasn't a blade of grass or a single flower. Except for John and Jacob, her only company would be seals and circling seagulls. Kate followed John and Jacob up the lighthouse's steep ladder. When she reached the top, John gave her a hand onto the wide deck that wrapped around the main floor of the lighthouse. Jacob impatiently pulled his mother toward the open door. Inside, a large circular room served as both kitchen and dining room. Lockers for clothes and cupboards for china were fit neatly into the walls. An oilcloth was spread on the kitchen table. At the far end of the room was a large black stove for cooking that also heated the downstairs in winter. John ushered Kate and Jacob up the winding stairs to the second-floor parlor. More steps took them to a large bedroom on the third floor, and 2 snug bedrooms on the 4th. In the small watchroom on the 5th floor, a door opened to a narrow catwalk with a sweeping view of Manhattan, New Jersey, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. A steep ladder led to the topmost floor, the glassed-in lantern room. The great light stood still and silent in the center of the tiny room. Its polished lenses sparkled in the sunlight, bright as a diamond. Those first few weeks, Kate didn't unpack her trunks, but she hung pictures and a pendulum clock in the parlor and filled the windowsills with flower pots and plants. She put down bright scatter rugs in all the rooms. In the kitchen, she settled her rocking chair next to the big black stove and moved her sewing machine under one of the windows where the light was good. Slowly, Robin's Reef began to feel more like a home, her home, and Kate decided to unpack. Once or twice a week, if the weather was good, John or Kate rode to Staten Island for fresh food, supplies, newspapers, and the mail. Sometimes Kate visited with friends she'd made there before rowing back to the lighthouse. Jacob boarded with a family in town and went to school, but he spent his weekends and summers at Robin's Reef. Kate applied to the United States Lighthouse Board for the job of assistant keeper. John had taught her a lot about keeping a lighthouse when they lived at Sandy Hook. Soon a letter arrived with good news. Kate had got the job. The work at Robin's Reef filled their days and nights. In the keeper's daily log, a new day started at 12 noon, not midnight. John and Kate had to record exactly how much coal and kerosene they used each day. They noted the wind and weather, if a ship foundered on the reef, or a fisherman needed to be rescued. That went in the logbook too. They polished the brass work on the light every day and cleaned the lenses once a month, a 2-day job. Each morning they filled 5-gallon cans with kerosene so that all was ready for the night watch. At sunset, regular as clockwork, gunfire and a bugle call at Fort J on nearby Governor's Island signaled it was time to light the lamp. All through the night, John and Kate took turns keeping watch, refilling the lamp when the kerosene was low, trimming the wicks so they wouldn't smoke, and rewinding the pulley mechanism that kept the light flashing. On foggy nights when the lighthouse beacon could not be seen, no one got any sleep. They had to fire up the steam engine in the basement that sent siren blasts every 3 seconds to warn passing ships about the dangerous shoals next to the lighthouse. If the steam engine broke down, one of them hammered on a bell on the catwalk outside the watchroom until the fog lifted. Their first spring at Robin's Reef, Kate and John's daughter May was born. In October, the Statue of Liberty opened. They watched the celebration through binoculars from the catwalk. There were bands, speeches, and fireworks. Several happy years passed in the evenings after supper. Kate's sewing machine hummed. Little May played with her toys and dolls. John might page through a week's packet of newspapers before beginning the night watch, or one of them would choose a book to read from the traveling library that circulated from lighthouse to lighthouse. Sometimes, late in the evening, Robin's Reef felt like a ship peacefully at anchor. Life in a lighthouse had its rhythms, Kate thought, as the soft sound of lapping water lulled her gently to sleep. Then one bitter February, when May was 3, John came down with pneumonia. Day and night Kate nursed him, all the while tending the light and looking after May. John needed to see a doctor, but the harbor was choked with ice and a trip to Staten Island would be dangerous. When he did not get better, Kate raised the distress signal, the American flag flown upside down, and prayed that help would come. Soon men from the lighthouse depot on Staten Island came to take John to the hospital. Bundled in blankets, John looked up at Kate as he was helped into their small boat and said, "Mind the light, Kate." Kate squeezed his hand. Of course she must stay behind and mind the light. The passing ships depended on it, and lives would be lost if the light went dark. Days went by without any word. Finally, Kate spied a small boat rowing slowly out to the lighthouse. The oarsman was alone. Kate knew the news was bad. John had died. A letter came from the lighthouse board informing Kate she must leave Robin's Reef in 10 days, but Kate persuaded the board to let her stay on until a replacement could be found. For 4 years, Kate worked as temporary keeper at low pay while the lighthouse board searched for a man to do the job. 2 men turned down the post because they said it would be too lonely. Finally, in 1895, Kate was hired as permanent keeper and got a raise, making her one of the first women on the eastern seaboard to be put in charge of an offshore lighthouse. A year later, Jacob, now 20, was hired as her assistant. Jacob lived part of the time on Staten Island, where he was courting his sweetheart, Loretta, and when May was going to school. But several times a week he rode to the lighthouse with supplies and took the night watch. There were no days off for Kate, not even on holidays. One Christmas, Kate encouraged Jacob and May to spend the day on Staten Island with friends. All day she kept an eye on the weather. A light snow began to fall. Then it grew heavier and changed to sleet. Kate knew her children would not try to row back to the lighthouse that night. As darkness fell, Kate started the siren. The wind picked up, and Kate heard a frightening sound out on the deck. One of the chains holding the lighthouse dory had come loose. She would have to go out and reattach the rowboat or lose her only lifeline to the outer world. Kate opened the door and stepped onto the icy deck. The wind nearly whirled her off the landing. As she neared the dory, the loose chain hit her on the eye. Finally, her frozen fingers secured the boat. Then Kate crawled back to the lighthouse door. Once inside, she sat down to a simple supper and counted her blessings. Although life at Robin's Reef could be lonely and hard in the winter, when summer came, Kate's friends from Staten Island would row out to the lighthouse for picnics. During one visit, Kate and her friends were sitting outside on the open deck drinking tea and enjoying the afternoon. Watching the constantly changing waterfront traffic was better than any parade. One of her friends asked her if she was ever lonely. Lonely, of course, but there are worse things than loneliness. Loneliness has taught me I can be a fairly entertaining companion for myself, and there are advantages. No burglars, no prying neighbors, no gossip, and plenty of fresh air. Kate became known for her rescues. One took place on a stormy winter day. Kate and Jacob watched through binoculars as a schooner foundered on the reef, then rolled over on its side. Jacob wanted to go, but Kate insisted that she would. She threw on her oilskin and sou'wester and lowered the lighthouse dory into the churning black water. The wind cut into her like a knife as she rowed toward the struggling crew. When she reached the men, she helped them one by one onto the boat. After the 5 were safely aboard, the captain looked around for his dog, Scotty. That's when Kate saw a small, exhausted terrier paddling in the waves. Kate maneuvered the boat close to the Scotty and fished him out of the water with an oar. The poor dog lay at her feet, cold and limp. For 2 hours, Kate and the men took turns towing against the wind and strong currents. When they got back to the lighthouse, Kate wrapped Scotty in a blanket and put him on the rug next to the stove. In bad weather, Kate always kept a pot of hot coffee on the stove. She poured a cup, black as tar, down Scotty's throat. The dog's eyes opened in surprise, then he gasped and shivered. After the storm died down, Jacob rowed the rescued men to the mainland. The captain promised to be back in a few days for Scotty. By the time he returned, Kate and Scotty had become good friends. As the captain and Scotty were leaving, the dog gave Kate a look of gratitude she would never forget. One day a letter came from the lighthouse board saying it was time for Kate to retire. The new retirement age was 70 and Kate was 71. She had lived at Robin's Reef for 33 years and rescued more than 50 people. Kate moved to a cottage on Staten Island with May, where she could be near her family and friends. Reporters from as far away as California and Canada came to write stories about Kate. Her eyes lit up or filled with tears as she recalled happy times and sad. Every morning when the sun came up, she remembered, I stood at the window and looked toward John's grave. Sometimes the hills were brown, and sometimes green, and sometimes white with snow, but they always brought the same message, something I heard him say more often than anything else, just 3 words: mind the light. And then there's a page, and there is a photograph of her. There's a page that tells more about her life. Kate's Light is based on a true story. Catherine Gortler was born in Germany in 1848 and grew up there. As a young woman, she married Joseph Caird and had a son, Jacob. Soon after, her husband died, so Kate decided to emigrate to America where there were more opportunities. It was a brave decision for someone who did not speak a word of English. After Kate married John Walker and moved to Robin's Reef in 1885, she had to adapt to the challenges of living in an offshore lighthouse. At the time, Robin's Reef was one of the most up-to-date lighthouses on the East Coast. The original granite lighthouse from 1839 had been replaced in 1883 with one made of cast iron. Equipped with a powerful fourth-order Fresnel lens, its flashing beacon could be seen on a clear night from as far away as 7 nautical miles. That's a way of measuring distance at sea, nautical miles. But Kate lived without the conveniences of modern life. The rooms were lit with kerosene lamps. Because the lighthouse had no electricity, Kate had no refrigerator, washing machine, or electric iron, and no hot water except for what she could heat on the coal stove in the kitchen. A cistern in the basement held filtered rainwater that was pumped by hand to the first floor. There was no indoor plumbing. With no central heating, the upper floors of the lighthouse were cold in winter. And of course, there were no telephones or cell phones, no radio or television, no movies, and no internet or email. Communication was either in person or by handwritten letters that could take days or even weeks to reach their destination. For entertainment, the Walkers had a gramophone and a traveling library, a chest of books supplied by the Lighthouse Board that was replaced every few months with new titles. Visits by the lighthouse tender, a supply ship that visited lighthouses up and down the coast, were rare. Once a year, the tender came by with supplies meant to last for the next 12 months and winched them onto the deck with a crane. 6 tons of coal for the stove poured down the lighthouse's coal chute into the basement, and barrels of kerosene were transferred from the tender to the deck. The tender also brought Kate's wages for the year, $350 when she was John's assistant, and $600 when she was finally promoted to lighthouse keeper in 1895. Occasionally there were inspections, which Kate always passed with flying colors. For trips to Staten Island, Kate used the lighthouse dory, a rowboat fit with 2 oars but no motor. An expert rower like Kate might make the mile-long trip in a half an hour in good weather, or 2 or 3 hours if the waves were rough. Sometimes, especially in the winter when the weather was bad, it was not safe to get to at all. Although Kate was entitled to days off each month, the Lighthouse Depot, a central office and warehouse on Staten Island, would have sent out a substitute to fill in for Kate. She seldom left the lighthouse for more than 7 or 8 hours at a time, and always with an eye on the weather, since storms could come up unexpectedly. 6 years after John Walker's death, Jacob was appointed assistant keeper at Robins Reef. He divided his time between Robins Reef and Staten Island, where he lived with his wife Loretta and their children. For several years before his children were school age, Jacob and his family lived with Kate at Robins Reef. After Kate retired in 1919, Jacob was promoted and stayed on for 2 years as keeper of the lighthouse. Kate died in 1931, but she is not forgotten. Even now, sailors sometimes refer to Robins Reef as Kate's Light. In 1996, the Coast Guard honored Kate by naming one of its cutters the USCGC Catherine Walker. 2 years later, the United States Postal Service celebrated Kate's 150th birthday by issuing a special commemorative envelope with her picture on it. The last keeper left Robins Reef in 1966 when the light was automated by the Coast Guard. For many years after that, the lighthouse stood empty and neglected. Now it is being restored by the Noble Maritime Collection on Staten Island. Someday, visitors will be able to see the lighthouse just as it was when Kate lived there. They will be able to stand on the catwalk where Kate stood for 33 years, binoculars in hand, looking out to busy New York Harbor, faithfully minding the light. And there is a picture of her standing up against the side of the lighthouse on a ladder. So I always tell you how much I enjoy seeing people in real photographs. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at our packet of material for Kate Walker. We have, if you had a chance to print this out, Susie is very interested in Kate Walker, as you can see. Very excited about it. We have a very full page of activities to go along with this one. There are a bunch of great sites listed up top with photos and things where you can see inside the lighthouse where she lived, and a short video of the lighthouse in present times, and the preservation efforts that have been going on to try to save the lighthouse and bring it back to its natural beauty. Shows a statue that is built in New York City to honor Kate, and watch the video link too. And you can hear the song. There was actually a song written called Kate Walker. And then number 6. Oh, wait till you see number 6 on here. It is making a lighthouse. And I'm going to show you mine because I'm very happy with mine. Just have to get it all set here for you. And it was a super easy craft, and it came out super nice. We have our very own lighthouse, which if I turned off the lights, you would still see it glowing because it has an actual light in it. Isn't that cool? So you can make your own lighthouse, and one of the neat things about it, it was really easy. It was not one of the tricky crafts. You can use substitute materials if you don't have red tape. You can use red strips of paper cut out. If you don't have the right color tissue paper, then make brown rocks. If you have brown tissue paper, whatever it may be, you can find substitutes for things. But I thought it came out really neat and really easy. The worst part is probably my windows and my door, because it's very tricky to draw on a cylinder if you've ever tried it. So that is my lighthouse in number 6. And then we have the directions for doing that. We have a lighthouse word search with various words that are familiar to lighthouse people in it. And we have, next thing on the list is the lighthouse crossword puzzle. And I did give you the answers. You might have to do some research to actually solve those, but some of the answers you can get from listening to the Kate Walker book that we read. Lighthouse trivia. I gave you all these pages. Let me get to that sheet here. So first I gave you the set of, whoops, I have it mixed up in my packet here. I gave you one set that has the answers and one set that has just the questions. So you might look like 2 copies of the same thing, but they're not. One is the question and your 4 choices, and then one is the 4 choices and it gives you the actual answer. And it refers you to a page in this book, Lighthouse for Kids. But if you don't have that book, that's okay. You can either look it up on the internet before you make your answer guess, or you can just guess for fun and see if you're right or not and learn what the right answer is. So that was some trivia, a couple sheets of that. And then next thing in the packet here is some lighthouse jokes. I gave you one with the actual joke and then a separate sheet that has the same joke question on it and the answer. So you don't have to look at the answers if you don't want to the first time. And after the lighthouse jokes, we have a lighthouse coloring page. But there are a lot of lighthouse coloring pages online. If you want to do a different one or you want to do more than just this one, you can go online and print some other ones out. This was just one that I found that I thought was kind of cute. So that is a bunch of activities. Some of those video links are really cool though, so check them out and see what more you can learn about Kate Walker and see some pictures of her back in her day, because she only was born about 140 years ago or so and died not too long ago. But for all those years, she kept that lighthouse without her husband around. And she was a very small woman. She was only, I think I read, about 5 feet tall or something. Weighed about 100 pounds. And she's out there rowing that boat in that strong, stormy water. Man, she was a fighter. And she did a lot of good stuff, saving people's lives. And running that whole lighthouse makes her practically like an engineer, keeping that light burning all the time. Never had a holiday. So think about that next time you get tired of 5 days of school and then want 2 days off. She never had any days off. No summer vacations either. So that is Mrs. Kate Walker. And this has been Miss Kathy from Shaler North Hills Library. If you are interested in reading more about lighthouses in general, or Kate Walker, or any of our other wonderful books in our collection, come on in and check it out. We are there 6 days a week for you in person, or we're still happy to fill requests if you'd rather have us do it like that. But come in and see us or give us a call, and we are happy to help you. So take care, thanks for watching, and I will see you at the next Superheroes of Steam. Bye!